Disclaimer, not disclaimer. This teaching is not intended to replace studying the Torah on Shabbat. Rather, it is an extension of Torah study to learn from the sins of our forebears in the ancient past so we will understand the Torah's practical application in our own lives today. We will also regain our national identity, which is so greatly missing among us. Our true identity is not the nation of our biological birth, but with biblical Israel. And the patriotism for biblical Israel, which we so badly need, can be gained by identifying with the people and history of those ancient times. Always study the Torah of Yahweh, which is His instructions, teachings, and His law, rolled into one word, Torah. Not only on Shabbat, but every day we should meditate on His Torah, His law. Psalms 119, 105. Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light for my path. Deuteronomy 5:33. You shall walk in all the ways which Yahweh your God has commanded you, that you may live, and that it may be well with you, and that you may prolong your days in the land which you shall possess. Psalms 1:1 and 1:2. Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stand on the path of sinners, nor sit in the seat of scoffers. But his delight is in Yahweh's law, His Torah. On His law, His Torah, he meditates day and night. Psalms 119, 174. I have longed for your salvation, Yahweh. Your law, your Torah, is my delight. All right, so we are now in teaching number 61. Can you believe it? I titled it, Saul in Charge. And before we get started, I want to pray over this teaching. Father, I thank you for the things that you have shown me. And I thank you for how you provide for us to be here and for us to all hear your word. And Father, I pray that only your word will come forth and prosper and flourish, and that anything that is from me, that's just from my personal opinion, or that's just of me and not of you, Father, that it would just die, and that only your word and your kingdom will prevail. I ask in Yeshua's name. Amen. So the title, Saul in Charge, is our hint that Yahweh is not in charge in Israel now. Yet, we will see that Yahweh will continue helping His people, even though this is the case. Saul is now the first king of Israel, and he will not become a dynastic king because he usurped Yahweh's place as the sovereign of Israel by inadvertently, or maybe even deliberately, doing what a king priest or a Melchizedek would do, offering a sacrifice to finish his own coronation, thus crowning himself. I went into this in more detail last week. Whether he had any inkling what his action would mean to Yahweh, and that's who we need to look to for all of our actions. What is this that I do? How is that going to look to Yahweh? We don't know. It appears that Saul did not take what this would mean to Yahweh into account. He just simply knew he was supposed to be king. Samuel didn't show up, so he did his own coronation. He finished his own 7-day coronation ritual. His Melchizedek-like sacrifice was then tantamount to him crowning himself, which is the exact opposite of what a king of righteousness, a Melchizedek, would do. This was the ultimate act of hubris, not the humility of a nagid, a prince and vassal of a king of Israel. Saul's heart was not with Yahweh. And now because he had stirred up the Philistines, getting ahead of God's timing, he has put Israel in danger and must face the consequences. And those consequences will be faced with only 600 men of those who were left from the original 3,000 who joined him at the beginning of his coronation week. So now we come to 1 Samuel 13, verse 19. Now there was no blacksmith found throughout all the land of Israel, for the Philistines said, lest the Hebrews make themselves swords or spears. But all the Israelites went down to the Philistines, each man to sharpen his own plowshare, mattock, axe, and sickle. The price was 1 payim each to sharpen mattocks, plowshares, pitchforks, axes, and goads. And so it came to pass on the day of battle that neither sword nor spear was found in the hand of any of the people who were with Saul and Jonathan, but Saul and Jonathan, his son, had them. The garrison of the Philistines went out to the pass of Michmash. The Philistines had the military hardware advantage, but where did Jonathan and Saul get their Philistine weapons? Those were illegal for Israelites. The Philistines controlled the iron and the skills for working with iron. Well, Scripture does not tell us where Saul and Jonathan got their swords. Maybe they took weapons from wounded or dead Philistines at those unauthorized battles during Saul's week-long coronation ritual. But we can imagine that there were more than 2 Philistines killed during this week. And all of those weapons from their dead or wounded should have been recovered by the people, the warriors, but apparently were not. So this might have been because of a fear by the people that if caught by a Philistine with those weapons in their possession, punishment would follow, which likely would result in their death. So this left Israel with, spears of copper or bronze, no iron spears. And here's the deal: the difference between the iron and the copper or the bronze was that copper and bronze are soft metals. They bend easily, and so the iron is much harder and more superior to that. But Israel was left with their Bronze Age spears and their bows and arrows, and that's what they had against the Philistines that had iron spears and iron swords. But don't worry. Yahweh knows how to use whatever is handy to accomplish his goals, even when those who call themselves by his name are not doing well. And yes, Vicky just popped up there saying that she's gotten cut off. Okay, 1 Samuel 14:1. Now it fell on a day that Jonathan, the son of Saul, said to the young man who bore his armor, "Come, let's go over to the Philistines' garrison that's on the other side." But he didn't tell his father. So on some random day, after some random length of time, after Saul had crowned himself king and alienated Samuel in the process, Jonathan gets this urge to battle some Philistines. Like, what was he eating? His oatmeal and his coffee and, saying, "Oh, let's just go have a fight." We don't know. We have no idea why this thought came to Jonathan. Scripture doesn't give us a motivation for Jonathan's actions, but what he did was probably born of eagerness, and perhaps it was even an eagerness planted by Yahweh himself into Jonathan, since Jonathan seems to have had a personal relationship with Yahweh, the evidence for which will be apparent as we study. 1 Samuel 14:2. Saul stayed in the uttermost part of Gibeah under the pomegranate tree, which is in Migron, and the people who were with him were about 600 men. And remember, he started out with 2,400 now, or 3,000, I mean. Now he's lost 2,400, and he's got 600 men with him. This uttermost part of Gibeah is Ketzeh in Hebrew. It's Strong's H7097, and it means a border area. And Saul was probably watching for the Philistines to come after him and to destroy Gibeah for having attacked them. Verse 3, and he's there, including now Ahijah, the son of Ahitub, Ichabod's brother, the son of Phinehas, the son of Eli, the priest of Yahweh in Shiloh. He's wearing an ephod. And the people didn't know that Jonathan was gone. Now, Ahitub or Ahitub had inherited the priesthood from Eli directly because his father Phinehas, the son of Eli, had died in the battle with the Philistines. And of course, Eli also died that day. But now, here is Saul, who has rejected Samuel, Yahweh's messenger, and he is now in alignment with the corrupt and unauthorized priesthood from the line of Ithamar that Yahweh rejected. And this priesthood is the reason why there are no gates for people to go do their sacrifices on, and that is why they're now doing their sacrifices and offerings on the high places. And of course, we just read in 1 Kings chapter 3 that, Solomon was ruling over a kingdom that had no place for people to come and do their sacrifices. The house of the Lord had not been built yet. And it mentioned that 2 or 3 times in that chapter, right? So that's why there were high places. Yahweh rejected that priesthood, and if they were going to do sacrifices, well, he wasn't going to accept those sacrifices. That was the reality that Saul and all Israel was dealing with at this time. So it is important to understand the reference to Ichabod also. That was Samuel telling us, by mentioning the unimportant son of Phinehas, which is Ichabod, who was born on the day that Yahweh slew the Ithamar line of the priesthood and left Israel to go live with his enemy, the Philistines, for 7 months. That was Samuel giving us a hint about Saul. The name Ichabod means no glory. Ikabod. Kabod is glory. Is no glory. The glory of God was departed, according to 1 Samuel 14:21 through 22. We read about Phinehas's wife giving birth to Ichabod, and she died along with Phinehas on that same day. So Samuel mentioning Ichabod, which is the lack of God's glory, appears to be Samuel giving us a hint about Saul, that the glory of God was not with him. This was not something that happened to Saul later on because of the way he treated David when the evil spirit came to Saul. That's something that I had been confused about myself, and I think other people might have been confused about that. But God's glory never was with Saul, because Saul disobeyed God's command through Samuel on the 7th day of his coronation week. So now let's get back to Jonathan. Verse 4. Between the passes by which Jonathan sought to go over to the Philistines' garrison, there was a rocky crag on the one side and a rocky crag on the other. And the name of one was Bozez, and the other was Seneh. The one crag rose up on the north in front of Michmash, and the other on the south in front of Geba. Jonathan said to the young man who bore his armor, "Come, let's go over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. It may be that Yahweh will work for us, for there is no restraint on Yahweh to save by many or by few." So here is where we start getting a clue about Jonathan's own relationship with Yahweh, because he has faith, he has trust in God, in Yahweh. Verse 7. His armor bearer said to him, "Do all that is in your heart. Turn, and behold, I am with you according to your heart." Then Jonathan said, "Behold, we will pass over to the men, and we will reveal ourselves to them. And if they say thus to us, 'Wait until we come to you,' then we will stand in our place and will not go up to them. But if they say this, 'Come up to us,' then we will go up, for Yahweh has delivered them into our hand. This shall be the sign to us." Both of them revealed themselves to the garrison of the Philistines. And the Philistines said, "Behold, the Hebrews are coming out of the holes where they had hidden themselves." The men of the garrison answered Jonathan and his armor-bearer and said, "Come up to us, and we will show you something." Jonathan said to his armor-bearer, "Come up after me, for Yahweh has delivered them into the hand of Israel." Jonathan climbed up on his hands and on his feet, and his armor-bearer after him, and they fell before Jonathan, and his armor-bearer killed them after him. Yahweh answered Jonathan's fleece and went into the battle with Jonathan, a sure sign that there was a personal relationship between Yahweh and Jonathan. Verse 14. That first slaughter which Jonathan and his armor-bearer made was about 20 men, within, as it were, half a furrow's length in an acre of land. Not very big space there for battle. There was a trembling in the camp, in the field, and among all the people. The garrison and the raiders also trembled, and the earth quaked. So there was an exceedingly great trembling. It was a little earthquake thing that happened there. Yahweh walking, putting his feet into that situation, causing the earth to tremble. The watchman of Saul in Gibeah of Benjamin looked, and behold, the multitude, and I have of Philistines, melted away and scattered. Then Saul said to the people who were with him, "Count now and see who is missing from us." When they had counted, behold, Jonathan and his armor-bearer were not there. And so, Saul, he suspected something, that one of his men had stirred up the Philistines, and so now he wants to know, who it was. Verse 18, Saul said to Ahijah, "Bring God's ark here," for God's ark was with the children of Israel at this time. Scripture is not clear here, but it appears that Saul had retrieved the ark from Kiriath-Yearim, likely to be a sign to the people that God was with him when the opposite was true. Let me go off track here. We have rumblings in Jerusalem right now, as the temple is wanting to get built, that there are some who believe the ark is in Jerusalem. And if the Jews make this claim, then we need to understand that it's not true. Because I've said in a previous teaching, John in Revelation said the ark was with God in heaven. And so if the coming son of perdition wants to appear to be valid to the people of the world, he'll do what Saul has done. He'll get himself an ark, and it'll be a sign to the people that God, Yahweh, is with the Jews, right? So there's that similarity there. We have to wait and see if that happens. I think it's possible, but I don't know for sure. And I'm sorry, I'm having to clear my throat. 1 Samuel 14:19. While Saul talked to the priest, that's Ahijah, the tumult was in the camp of the Philistines went on and increased. And Saul said to the priest, "Withdraw your hand." What was Saul doing? He was consulting Ahijah via the Urim and Thummim, but of course no answer was forthcoming, so Saul gave up on that. Yahweh was not only not speaking to Saul, but he was not letting Ahijah, the priest of Ittamar, be a priest. He was not acknowledging Ahijah's priesthood. But the Lord was speaking to Jonathan by giving him the victory. Verse 20, Saul and all the people who were with him were gathered together and came to the battle, and behold, they, meaning the Philistines, were all striking each other with their swords in very great confusion. You see, Saul and Jonathan were the only Israelites who had swords, so Yahweh turned the Philistines' swords on each other. Yahweh had promised to send confusion into the enemy's camps when the Israelites were driving out the Canaanites. He said that in Exodus 23:27 and Deuteronomy 7 verse 23. 1 Samuel 21 says, "Now the Hebrews who were with the Philistines before, and who went up with them into their camp," the camp of the Philistines, from all around, even they also turned. Now these defecting Hebrews turned from the Philistines to be with the Israelites who were with Saul and Jonathan. So here we have the big aha. We have some Israelites had actually defected and were living among and were allied with the Philistines. Wow. Verse 22. Likewise, all the men of Israel who had hidden themselves in the hill country of Ephraim, when they heard that the Philistines fled, even they also followed hard after them in the battle. So Yahweh saved Israel that day, and the battle passed over by Beit Aven. Yahweh saved Israel that day. Saul had nothing to do with it. But Jonathan's decision to engage the Philistines did. However, Saul was not about to be undone or outdone. As a result of what happened, for the rest of the day, Saul called a false fast. In verse 24, the men of Israel were distressed that day. You know, they've already, in this morning, they've been fighting. But Saul had adjured the people, saying, "Cursed is the man who eats any food until it is evening." So from now, for the rest of the day, you can't have anything to eat. Don't freshen yourselves at all. And don't do it. And I am avenged of my enemies. So none of the people tasted food. Well, first of all, it was Saul who should have been fasting and repenting. Second, the Philistines were not Saul's enemy alone. They were Yahweh's and all Israel's enemy. So he should have said of the Philistines, he should have called them our enemy. But this shows us how self-centered Saul was, and how his ego now made him think of himself as God, as the God of Israel, the Philistines are my enemy. And then third, oh, and by the way, isn't that what the coming son of perdition will do? You know, he wants to show himself to be God. And then third, while Jonathan's actions had thrown confusion into the Philistine camp, Saul was putting the spotlight on himself by calling for his men to fast, to show that God was indeed with him and not with them, with Jonathan and his armor bearer. You know, Saul, he had the ark, he had the priesthood, and there was a successful battle, and then there's a fast, which would prove his point that the glory to be, that was going to be had, should belong to him. Now, you know, the coming son of perdition will deceive people with the same kind of smoke and mirrors. He will make it appear that Yahweh is with and has blessed him. So just be forewarned. Verse 25. All the people came into the forest, and there was honey on the ground. When the people had come to the forest, behold, honey was dripping. But no one put his hand to his mouth, for the people feared the oath that Saul had made. Yahweh was providing sustenance for this weakened army, but over the threat of death issued by Saul, they continued into battle in a weakened condition. Verse 27. But Jonathan didn't hear when his father commanded the people with the oath. Therefore he put out the end of the rod that was in his hand and dipped it in the honeycomb and put his hand to his mouth, and his eyes brightened. So there they are. They're going through the woods. There's some honey. Nobody but Jonathan takes some of the honey, and then one of the people said, "Your father directly commanded the people with an oath, saying, 'Cursed is the man who eats food today.' And the people were faint. Then Jonathan said, 'My father has troubled the land. Please look how my eyes have brightened because I tasted a little of this honey. How much more if perhaps the people had eaten freely today of the plunder of their enemies which they found? For now has there been no great slaughter among the Philistines.'" In other words, what he's saying is, you know, there's an outcome for this battle that could have been so much greater for Israel if their commander, King Saul, had a relationship with Yahweh and had done what Yahweh said. But no, Saul weakened his troops through fasting in the day of battle. Thus, Saul showed his incompetence to lead. That's because Saul wanted the glory for himself. You know, we killed some Philistines because we fasted. But Jonathan is here saying there was no great slaughter among the Philistines. We got some of them, but it could have been a lot better. So the most that Saul could do was issue a death sentence for anyone found not fasting. Verse 31. They struck the Philistines that day from Michmash to Aijalon. The people were very faint. However, Saul's foolish fast caused the people to pounce on the plunder, take the sheep, cattle, and calves, kill them on the ground, and then the people ate the raw meat with the blood. Saul caused his men to be so famished from battle that they ate the raw, bloody meat, which is an abomination to Yahweh. In effect, Saul led Israel into idolatry. It was idolatry because that is, you know, eating the raw meat and drinking the blood, or eating the blood with the meat, is one of the main practices of people who worship the demonic deities. verse 33. When they told Saul, saying, Behold, the people are sinning against Yahweh, in that they eat meat with the blood, he said, You have dealt treacherously. Not I have made a mistake. No, it's your fault. You have dealt treacherously. Roll a large stone to me today. And some of the people had refrained from this sin, and Saul now seeks to rectify the situation. Even he understood the gravity of this act. Verse 34, Saul said, Disperse yourselves among the people and tell them, Every man bring me here his ox, and every man his sheep, and kill them here, and eat. And don't sin against Yahweh in eating meat with the blood. All the people brought every man his ox with him that night, and killed them there. Saul built an altar to Yahweh, said Samuel. And Samuel also said, This was the first altar that Saul had built to Yahweh. So Saul apparently had not built an altar to Yahweh when he crowned himself king, which was another of his foibles in the ceremony. He simply offered the animals on the ground. But this time, the corrupt priesthood was present to do the sacrifice, which doesn't mean that God accepted any of their sacrifices, but at least they were not trying to do this on the ground. And it may actually be that Samuel is not real explicit here. We don't know if they did a sacrifice to Yahweh and then all the people came with their animals and just slaughtered them and cooked them. We don't really get very much detail here. And then in verse 36, Saul said, Let's go down after the Philistines by night and take plunder among them until the morning light, and let's not leave a man of them. And they said, Do whatever seems good to you. Then the priest said, Let's draw near here to God. So Ahijah was correct in calling Saul and the people to get near to Yahweh. But the other point here is that these men have now eaten, and their strength is returning, and now they're going to be able to go down during the night and plunder the Philistines. Verse 37. Saul asked counsel of God, Shall I go down after the Philistines? Will you deliver them into the hand of Israel? But he, that's Yahweh, didn't answer him, that's Saul, that day. Saul said, Draw near here, all you chiefs of the people, and know and see in which this sin has been today. So Saul now, because God is not answering him, Saul is going to blame somebody. For as Yahweh lives, who saves Israel, though it is in Jonathan my son, he shall surely die. But there was not a man among all the people who answered him. The people were silent because they already knew who ate that day. They were protecting Jonathan because they knew he had not heard his father's foolish command. Therefore, Jonathan had not sinned against Saul, and he did not deserve to die. And then he said to all Israel, that's Saul, You be on one side, and I and Jonathan my son will be on the other side. The people said to Saul, Do what seems good to you. And therefore Saul said to Yahweh, the God of Israel, Show the right. Jonathan and Saul were chosen, but the people escaped. So now, because Saul has asked Yahweh, the God of Israel, to show who is the one in the right, Yahweh is answering Saul. And Saul said, Cast lots between me and Jonathan my son, and Jonathan was selected. Jonathan was selected as what? According to Yahweh, Jonathan was selected as the right one, the righteous one. But Saul now looks like the fool and an unrighteous leader, which he was. And then Saul said to Jonathan, "Tell me what you have done. What have you done, Jonathan, that makes Yahweh see you as being in the right?" Wow. Jonathan told him and said, "I certainly did taste a little honey with the end of the rod that was in my hand, and behold, I must die." "What have you done, Jonathan, that makes you right and me not right?" Well, Saul said, "God do so and more also, for you shall surely die, Jonathan." So Saul, in order to save face over his foolish command, was willing to kill his righteous son. This is the epitome of the son of perdition. If he doesn't get to save face, he's going to kill you, righteous or not. Verse 45. The people said to Saul, "Shall Jonathan die, who has worked this great salvation in Israel? Far from it. As Yahweh lives, there shall not one hair of his head fall to the ground, for he has worked with God today." So the people are now seeing Saul as the one who has no relationship with Yahweh. So the people rescued Jonathan that he did not die. Then Saul went up from following the Philistines, and the Philistines went to their own place. This is where Saul begins to be miserable. But the people said, "Shall Jonathan die, who has worked this great salvation in Israel?" So far we have seen how Saul compares to the son of perdition, but now we see how Jonathan compares to Yeshua, who worked great salvation in Israel that day. The people saved Jonathan from his own father, and Jonathan becomes a representative of the faithful remnant of Israel. Saul knew that he would not have an army, and he would not be king over Israel if he killed Jonathan. But let's think more about this for a minute. Saul was willing to kill his own son, something the heathen did with their sons. Thus Saul was right in line with perdition, lawlessness. That's what the word perdition means, lawless. 1 Samuel 14:47. Now when Saul had taken the kingdom over Israel, he fought against all his enemies on every side, against Moab, against the children of Ammon, and against Edom, against the kings of Zobah, and against the Philistines. Wherever he turned himself, he defeated them. That word taken, or some versions say took, I emphasize that word. It is Strong's H3920. It is lakad, and it's a primitive root word which means to catch, like catching in a net, a trap, or a pit. It means, though, generally to capture or occupy. It can also mean to choose or to cohere and all these other words you see there, but the sense of this word is that Saul had captured Israel from Yahweh. He had taken Israel from Yahweh. And that's what Yahweh is expressly saying right here, that Saul took the kingdom as in theft. Now, I explained where this capturing of Yahweh's kingdom was in last week's teaching. It was where Saul finished his own coronation by not waiting for Samuel to crown him. Rather, Saul crowned himself when he performed that king-priest sacrifice for himself. But despite this, Yahweh was still with Israel, and wherever Saul fought battles, he won them. The wording by Samuel here implies that Saul also took credit for winning the battles. You know, I'm winning them, I'm beating them, I am the hero. Samuel is telling us that Saul was taking credit for winning those battles because Saul was not about to give the glory to Yahweh. So we just need to understand that sometimes it can appear as if Yahweh is with the wicked. But it was Yahweh who won those battles for Israel because of the promises he had made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then we have also in 1 Chronicles 5:10 and 2 Samuel 21:1 that Saul fought the Hagrites and had battles with the Gibeonites. These battles are not mentioned here in 1 Samuel 14. Verse 48 says, "He did valiantly and struck the Amalekites and delivered Israel out of the hands of those who plundered them." The Amalekites were still, after over 1,000 years, plundering Israel just as they had done when Israel came out of Egypt, for which Yahweh said they were to be utterly destroyed. And I said it was over 1,000 years, and I'm trying to count it up in my head. It's roughly, I think, 900 to 1,000 years. Verse 49, "Now the sons of Saul were Jonathan, Ishvi, Malchishua, and the names of his 2 daughters were these. The name of the firstborn was Merab, and the name of the younger was Michal. The name of Saul's wife was Ahinoam, the daughter of Ahimaaz. The name of the captain of his army was Abner, the son of Ner, who was Saul's uncle." And so what this basically means is that Abner, the captain of his army, was his cousin. Kish was the father of Saul, and Ner, the father of Abner, was the son of Abiel. There was severe war against the Philistines all the days of Saul. And when Saul saw any mighty man or any valiant man, he took him into his service. And so didn't Samuel warn Israel of this conscription, this forced service, in 1 Samuel 8, verses 10 to 12? Yes, he did. When the scripture says here that when Saul saw a mighty man or any valiant man, he took him into his service, it means that Saul forced those men into military service against their will. The way that Yahweh set up his kingdom, that all the men were to be at home with their families. There was no standing army in Israel. The standing army was all the men who were, farmers and merchants and, whatever they were. And when there was an enemy, they came together, but they were not to have a standing army. That came about because there came to be kings. You see how disobedience changed the government, the way the government was operating, the government, how it was set up in Israel in those days. The kingdom under Saul then became one of great distress. Yet in the distress there was a righteous son, Jonathan, who represents the remnant of Yahweh. And there was also a coming righteous king, David, representing Yeshua the Messiah. We have remnant today, and we also have Yeshua today, and we are looking forward to the return of our King and our God, Yeshua. So remember that even in times of great distress, Yahweh is still there. He is still with us behind the scenes. We have nothing to fear. And that ends the teaching.